time to look at the second half of the Kansas City Chiefs post-bye. How do they accelerate towards the end of the regular season and looking forward into the postseason, despite all the distractions and everything else today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome in, Chiefs Kingdom, to kicking off the second half of the Chiefs 2023 season on through 2024. We're brought to you today by Gametime. They make life easy. Go get the Gametime app, sign up, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get your first $20 off your first purchase. It's last-minute tickets, it's lowest prices, and it is guaranteed. We have great bit to go over as we start to get riled up here for the second half of the season. What are our predictions? What comes ahead, and how do they get started today? We have a lot to go over. Thanks for making us your first listen here on Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day for free on every platform, starting with YouTube, where we are actually live here on Sunday. Kind of a rarity to be live when the daylight's out, but that's all right. And getting back onto Spotify and Apple, and everywhere you get a free podcast, you can find us 5 days a week, sometimes more, especially if you're one of our everydayers. We appreciate you guys, and you locos drive it here. If you want to get that and the inside, make sure you sub, make sure you like this video here on YouTube, and get on the text line at 816-357-8781. 87's a question here. There are a lot of distractions as we start the second half of the season. Somebody's probably on an airplane somewhere. We'll probably get into that later in the show. But we'll look at the Eagles here later, coming off of the Dolphins. We're going to give you where we think they're going to end up for the regular season. But first, it's about starting. Starting the second half is always something that we give Andy a lot of credit because he comes off of the buys very, very well. This may be the most complex and formidable opponent that he's come off the bye towards in quite a long time. A Monday night game against the Philadelphia Eagles, prime time after what is a long layoff and even an extra day of what you normally get in the bye week. I think that despite all that, and despite the Kelsey on Kelsey reunion, somebody's going to be tired. And I think the Chiefs actually have the advantage here, given that they have had more of a struggle in the first half of the season, in my opinion.
They have had a little bit of more of a struggle, and I think that that's going to be something that I guarantee you they've been working on trying to figure out over the break. Maybe Patrick Mahomes got out of town for a couple of days. I know he was down in Dallas or watching basketball down there and next to his hometown, but I bet you he was in the facility a couple of days last week, especially considering they had the 15 and the Mahomes thing on Thursday, so he was still in Kansas City at that point. I'm sure him and Reed have been working on the offense, trying to figure out what it is that they can do to make adjustments to get the offense to be what we expect this offense to be. But you're right, they've struggled, and it's going to be something that's going to be intriguing to watch the second half of the season. One thing I will say, though, watching the game against the Dolphins, like Kansas City has played some good offensive teams so far, not great. But the Dolphins are a great offensive team. Seeing what they're able to do against the Dolphins, I think, has to make you feel better about what they're able to do against another great offense against the Eagles. So that's going to be something to watch. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later here in the show.
Yeah. And the Eagles, it's not one-for-one comparison. When you look, the AFC is a tougher conference. So when you take a look at the comparisons in terms of records, Baltimore, Jacksonville, even Pittsburgh has a higher strength of schedule rating than the Eagles do. So it's a little bit deceiving there, but they do sit atop the NFC. So it's significant. And to get off on a good start to the second half there, I think is imperative, especially when you're trying to relive that Kelsey Bowl moment, right? Like nothing's been as big since the two of them going head to head, other than Travis's relationship, which we're not even going to get into here over this last weekend. But those two together, I think they both lead their teams in different ways. And so to bring it back together and have that Super Bowl rematch at this point, coming off of the bye, they're both a little bit rested. The degrees is how much. And I think this is probably the advantage for Reed coming off the bye is one thing, but the advantage for the offense to be able to reset itself. They've been living on defense, and I feel good about that. And I actually feel good about this defensive matchup against the Eagles, whether it was bye related or not. But the chance for the offense to reset, I think, is the key. And the Kelsey competition, brother to brother, I haven't even been watching the series, but I can only imagine how much it gets ramped up this week in being able to go against each other. I think this helps Travis more than Jason and the Eagles. Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy. I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Now, the other thing that actually helps Kansas City going into this game is, and I don't want to talk about our predictions. We'll get into that obviously later in the week. But let's just say for just a second, since we're looking at the second half of the season and we're looking really at what the Chiefs are going to be doing, but in reality, it really matters what the entire AFC does. But a loss against the Eagles on Monday night doesn't hurt Kansas City near as much as a loss to another AFC team down the road could. So I'm not expecting – I don't want to get into predictions. I'm not saying they're going to lose. I'm just saying this is a game that isn't going to matter as much when it comes to playoff seeding, and that is going to be something that matters. And you look at who's playing right now. The Bengals, as we are recording this right now, they're losing to the Texans. Now, whether or not that ends up being the case, we'll see. But then they come back and they have a hard game against the Ravens in Baltimore on Thursday night. That's going to be a tough turnaround for them. That's a big game for them. Broncos play the Bills on Monday Night Football this coming week. That's going to be something to watch. I would imagine the Bills will be fine. But my whole point is that you're in a scenario where they're going up against a team that's not going to really hurt them near as much when you start looking at conference standings because it's a non-conference game. I think that actually plays into Kansas City's favor a little bit, and I do think that they're going to play this game tough regardless.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when you look at beyond getting past the Eagles here to start this second half of the season, you get Las Vegas twice in the next 5 games. I mean, we can talk about any number of reasons why that's a matchup. There's Max Crosby and there's question marks. That's probably the best way to put it. Then you get Green Bay. You have New England in there on December 18th. Right now, still scheduled for December 18th. That's probably flexible. It's a Monday night against New England. I don't think that's going to be a ball game, so we'll see if it stays there or not. But really, after the Eagles, in that next 5-game run, the only team that you're really concerned about is the Bills, and the Bills have not been firing on all cylinders. Did they get it right here against the Broncos that we're about to see tonight? Maybe.
And their defense is struggling. That's the bigger key with the Bills is they've had some huge defensive losses this season, and that is really pushing their record at this time. Maybe their offense is playing okay. I would say they're playing okay to maybe just a little bit good, but their defense is where they're really struggling. They can't stop people right now, and that's really affecting how they're going to be able to play. That's going to be something to watch when they play the Broncos on Monday night. Can the Broncos move the ball? Can they score points? Can they make that actually a game? Versus what you would expect the Bills to be able to blow the Broncos out just because it's the Broncos and they're not that great of a team. Although, obviously, they had Kansas City's number a couple of weeks ago, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's very true. So how does this year work out? Sitting here versus our preseason predictions, where are we at and what do we see coming? We're getting that next.
And I want to tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Have you ever had a trouble getting yourself tickets for a game? I know that when I go look for Chiefs tickets, it can be a very big hassle trying to find the tickets I want, when I want, where I want them. But Gametime can help you with that. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show up total up front so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Guarantees are hard to come by, but we give you our honest assumptions analysis and we break that down. If I remember correctly, you had them going 12-5 in our preseason prediction. I had them at 13-4. We're both clearly on track for that. You're a little bit ahead of me at this point. Does anything that we learned in the first half give you pause about how we were rationaling what our predictions were early? Chris will be back in just a second.
It gets harder. And what I mean by that is you're sitting here looking at a scenario where it doesn't really matter about, we went into the season thinking that these teams were going to be this at this point in this part of the season. Some of those teams aren't where we expected them to be. And you start talking about the Raiders. We expected them to be as bad as they have been, but now they have a new coach. It's a question whether or not they can continue to get better with the new coach. We'll see, but they really played well for them the first week that they played. I didn't expect the Patriots to be 2-8. Right now they're 2-8. did not expect that. I'm not saying that I expected the Patriots to be able to beat the Chiefs, but it's still not where I expected. Green Bay is another story. I mean, you get into those types of games, I thought they'd be better than they are. So you start looking at the back half of the season, and this is going to be really fun, in my opinion, for Kansas City. So I'll go and start off. I think that this Eagles team is a very good team. I think that they can play very well, but I do think Kansas City's defense is better than – obviously they're better than what they played in the Super Bowl. And I do think they're going to be able to get pressure on Jalen Hurts. I do think that the big question when it comes to this Eagles team is, can you get them to where they're in 3rd and 5 versus 3rd and 2? 3rd and 2 becomes a 2-down territory to get to 4th and to get a 4-down conversion and use tush push twice to get the 2 yards that you would need. So if you can stay 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6 or better, I think you're in a good situation. They can't use tush push in those types of scenarios, probably even down to 3rd and 4. But you get much closer than that, that kind of changes things. So I don't think Spagnuolo is going to be able to stop that play. It just doesn't seem like defense has been able to find something to get it done. The Eagles have got that play down. So if you can stay out of those scenarios where you're not giving them the 3rd and 3s, the 3rd and 2s, where they can go for it in 2 downs and get that first down, I think that you could, make this offense punt the ball and get the ball back in your offense's hands. Now the question then becomes, can Kansas City's offense score? Well, the Philadelphia defense isn't near as good as it was last year when they played in the Super Bowl. So to me, coming off the bye, I think Andy Reid is going to have the time to study this offense for his team and study the Philadelphia Eagles defense and get the offense going, at least in the first couple of drives, to score some points. And I do think Kansas City wins this game.
Yeah, I have to think so as well. When we take a look at getting to where we were preseason to where we are now, looking at the schedule for the year predictions, this is where it becomes interesting, because what we thought were teams that were going to be formidable, specifically on defense, like you said, the Eagles are not as confident. That Buffalo is not. I think that plays into what we've seen in terms of game script to this point. I do think that there is a conspiracy theory going on that has some merit about Kadarius Toney and about how little he's been used and how little creativity they've chosen to use with him. When you take a look at who's the receiving leader for each game this season, you have Valdez-Scantling and Moore that started the season off, and then it's been Kelsey, and then Noah Gray last week, of all things, when Patrick Mahomes had his lowest yardage output that I can recall at 185 yards. All that goes back to anybody but Kadarius Toney. And that feels like that's where it's starting to slip. And when you take a look at, when you're planning out the season, like Coach Reid does, you take a look at the second half, and it is this run, starting with the Eagles, going to the Buffalo Bills in a couple of weeks. Then with the New Year's Eve game against the Bengals, you're kind of saving some things to this second half, maybe more so than years previous. And I think Kadarius Toney is a big part of it specifically. But those matchups aren't what they were. The injury to Burrow, the lack of defense in Buffalo is still outstanding to me. I still can't, as a McDermott believer, that's hard to materialize for me. So It comes down to what I had originally thought was going to be 13-4. That certainly is within the realm of possibility. Are they maybe the same 2 losses down the stretch that I had originally planned for? Maybe not. But this game, Eagles, Buffalo, Cincy, obviously the top 3. The sneaker one, and it's only because there's something about the Los Angeles Chargers that no matter how broken they are in terms of injuries, they still play this team tough. I don't expect much from New England. I don't expect much from Las Vegas in either meeting. Do you?
No, I don't. Really quick on the Chargers, the question is going to be where's the conference standings at that point? And we'll get to that when we get to that game. But that could make a difference between whether or not Kansas City even cares about winning or losing that game. So, we're going to talk about predictions, but I'm still going with Philadelphia to win, or I'm still going with Kansas City to beat Philadelphia as we're looking at the predictions right now. Where are you going on that one?
Yeah, I definitely have that as one of the losses.
You have that as a loss. So you think they lose to Philly this weekend?
It's not that I think that they do. I think that's one of the 2 most likely.
Okay, fair enough. What about the Raiders?
We'll give you our actual predictions on Friday, folks, based on what we learned this week. But yeah, the 2 most formidable foes, the Eagles are one of them.
Yeah, that's true. Eagles and Bengals, in my opinion. I don't think I wouldn't count the Bills in that regard, mainly because of the way their defense has been playing. So I'm going to go win this week. So if we're trying to get to a record prediction, are you thinking that they're going to lose or win this one?
I think in the end, I'm going to keep it until Friday for this particular game, but I am going to say that there's still 2 losses out there. And you bring up a good point about week 17 of, game 17, whether that is, a standings race or whether it's decided by them, that will play into that. So that could throw it off. But I still feel very good about my 13-4 from the preseason, that there's 2 possible hiccups in here and a number of games that they ought to beat those teams. And as frustrating as the offense has been this season, they've still only lost 2 games to this point. So I do feel like 13-4 is still the prediction I'm going with, and it feels like that's accomplishable for this roster.
Fair enough. So you got them beating the Raiders in week 12.
Yes, and whatever other week they play them.
Okay, so
in all weeks, let's put it that way.
Week 12, they beat the Raiders. Week 13, they beat the Packers.
Yes.
Okay, and then they host the Buffalo Bills. Do you have them winning that game, or do you think that's one of the ones that they could drop?
It's a possibility, but right now I have them winning that one.
Okay, so then we get Patriots on week 15, a Monday night game. We both have them winning that one. Raiders week 16, I have them winning that one. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick this, and I'll pick it out the rest of the way. Cincinnati Bengals, I think that this is where they could lose their 3rd game.
Mm-hmm.
I still think that they have an opportunity to maybe get through the season and go 15-2, but I could see a loss against the Bengals. The bigger difference here for this game for me than in any season before is Kansas City's defense is playing so much better than they've ever played against any opponent to this point. And when you're sitting here looking at the second half of the season, Kansas City has always found ways to tighten the screws a little bit on defense, regardless of who they're playing. So I do think that's also going to play into this. So they've been playing fantastic the first half of the season. I think they get even better in the second half.
Yeah, I agree with you. And given the struggles that the Bengals have had, that's a game that I still have. I agree with you. I think is the second most likely loss in this last half of the season. But it doesn't mean that that's likely. It just, if I'm picking the 2 most possible foes that could pull that off, it is Cincinnati. But they are not what they thought they were. Despite last week's output, this week they look anemic again. So it's going to be back and forth all season.
Well, they're missing T. Higgins, and I'm wondering how much is that going to play in? Is he going to be available? Is Chase going to be available? Chase is dealing with a back injury right now. That's going to play into how all this goes. But the interesting thing is the 3 games in the back half of the season for the Chiefs that they could be struggling with. Hi, Matthew. Is they all play at home. They all play at Arrowhead.
Yeah.
That's going to be huge for Kansas City. So I really like the way this could stand. I'm looking at them going 14-3, maybe 15-2, if they can find a way to get through the rest of the season. But again, like I said earlier, depending on what they do, how they're ended up against the Bengals in the rest of the season, obviously, could determine whether or not they even care about the game in Week 18. Yeah,
and that may throw our preseason predictions off kilter, but I'll live with that. That'll be just fine. Thank you very much. If they don't care about week or game 17, hey, that works for me just fine.
I'm with you as well.
So when we look at how they get this thing started, what do they have to do specifically for the Eagles? This is going to be a long conversation all week long. Make sure you're with us. Matt Derrick will be here on Wednesday, and we will have the inside info on Thursday as well. But the Eagles are going to become the center point as of now. We're going to get to them right after we get back. The action is certainly ramping up. This week is no exception. Coming off the bye, you have a lot of expectations for Andy Reid in this offense. And if you want to get in the action, right now is the time to do it. You can get, for a new customer, $150 in bonus bets. When you win one bet, one $5 bet on the money line, you can get $150 bonus bets applied to your account. Very, very simple. This is probably a great game to do it because it's going to be tight. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you happen to be wagering along the lines of your particular team, you want to get in that action. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel right now is the time to do it. There is no better time to get in the action. Whether you want to bet the spread, the player props, the unders, the overs, the money lines, anything that you want to get in, you can do it because the app is super easy to use, very functional, and there's a wide variety for you available everywhere. Right now, just go over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get into the thick of this season right now as the Chiefs come off of the bye. That's FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. And when we look at what that game is going to entail, I do think it is going to be fairly close. Again, what does the offense kick in? What do they let out of the barn? I think there's a 1,000 plays and a couple of extra weapons and concepts that are stuck in the barn right now. Does Andy open the door wide, or does he just crack it? That's going to be the question for me. But it comes down to, you have to be able to bring the same balance. And while the Eagles defense is still formidable, it's not the same as it was before. And I do think it's able to be run on a little bit more than in years past, certainly last season. I'd like to see it start with that's probably a pipe dream. But if you can lull them to sleep a little bit, especially in the first quarter, by just coming out in what people have been calling in Kansas City the boring offense, by emphasizing the run and the balance there. When you look at the season total so far, Pacheco, 525 yards on the ground. Travis Kelce, your leader in receiving, at 597, within 100 yards of each other. If they can maintain that in the first quarter, I think that will lull the Eagles into a sense of security that you can exploit later in that ballgame, maybe go over the top.
Well, the question to me is going to be, what are they going to do against Kelce? And I'm talking about the Eagles when they are playing on defense. Because what we have seen the past couple of weeks, when teams are able to shut down Kelce, and granted, the Broncos didn't shut him down like the Dolphins did. But if the Eagles can replicate what the Dolphins did on defense and shut down Kelce, that's going to cause issues for this team. Kelce got 2 catches, I think, on the first 2 drives, and then didn't get a target until the third quarter, didn't catch his third pass until the fourth quarter against the Dolphins. That's something that you cannot allow to happen going into this game. You cannot allow him to have that little impact on this game. And don't get me wrong, on the second touchdown, he was obviously a decoy. He took 3 defenders with him and got Jerick McKinnon wide open. That's great, but you still need to get him more involved in the offense than only getting 4 targets and 3 catches to have a good chance in this game. And I agree with you. I think that they do need to lull him to sleep a little bit. They need to run the ball with Pacheco, but they also need to make sure that maybe they get the screen game going in this one to the running backs. They haven't used it much at all this season, and they're going to be facing a formidable pass rush. It's also a question. I think that there's still some question marks about Philly's health when you look at their defensive line. I think that they should be pretty healthy, but it's a question. I know Fletcher Cox went out against the Cowboys. Whether or not he's going to be able to come back in and be fine, that's going to be a big question. He's a huge difference maker on their defensive line. You're
absolutely right. And how can you help their defensive line is by giving them good coverage to slow down the ability to get the ball out. And Patrick's been pretty slow delivering the ball in this first half of the season. It's one of the primetime indicators that we're going to talk about throughout the week, about how they get that shifted and just how key that it is. But if you look at the last time that the Eagles were on the field, how did they choose to do things? I think Miami gave it away that if you just put all your effort into stopping Travis Kelce, you can remove him from a lot of the ballgame. They used a couple of slot corners in Sidney Brown and Eli Ricks, who gave up 100% completion rate. So for the Eagles, I don't know if that's the way that they want to go. We're going to talk about the defensive strategy later in the week, but I want to point a couple of things out, because you have Slay, that's probably their best cover corner still. Do you move him in? Do you take him off of the left-hand side and just give him to Travis Kelce and bracket that way? The addition of Kevin Byard, I think, has been telling, but it hasn't been as good in the coverage side as you would hope that it was in terms of run support. I think it's leaning that way. The pass rush we're going to talk about later in the week, but that will be the hand in hand. I think, again, stop me if you heard this before, it all depends on how they choose to defend Travis Kelce and what that allows the Chiefs to do off of that. That riff is going to be the difference.
Well, and the one thing I will say is them playing this week versus 2 or 3 or 4 more weeks down the road, playing the Eagles, I think is a big thing when it comes to Kevin Byard. I do think that you're going to see him be having a bigger impact in the second half of the season than he's probably going to have this week. I think he's still getting acclimated to their defense, he understands the scheme, but it's a thought process, and how big of a deal is it for a player to completely understand what they're supposed to be doing, because they can just react and not think. I think he's still thinking, and I do think that's going to cause some issues. I'm not expecting it to cause huge issues for their defense, but I think that's one of the things that's slowing them down a little bit at this point, which is actually going to play into Kansas City's favor a little bit, them playing them now versus playing them 2 or 3 weeks down the road.
Yeah, agreed. And that transition is always something that's a little bit challenging. Let's see what they get into. I think that on the offensive side, that's one thing. For the Chiefs defense to maintain what they've been producing so far, I think is going to take some discipline. And certainly, I don't know that they have to be as blitz happy. I do think that they need to be a little bit more concentrated on the between the tackles area, whether it's those sneaks or just being able to defend the run, get a little bit more push there, constrict the pocket, collapse it around Jalen Hurts. I think that's probably the way that you want to go. They've got Swift, who's been playing decently. And what did he get last time out? It was Gainwell that actually hit him with like a 7.3 yards per carry. I don't think that that's the emphasis, but if you take that away, I think it opens up all the options. We're going to talk about the defensive game plan coming up during this week, but for me, it's basically showing up and being physical and showing that interior three that you can handle.
Interesting thing to me is they just brought Mike Pennell back to the practice squad. Mm-hmm. Is this a week they bring him up? Is this a week they say, okay, well, we're going to bring up another defensive tackle that we know that they like to run the ball. We know that we need more beef inside. Can you maybe sit a guy like Dickerson this week and put in Pennell in his place and try to give them a little bit more beef up front to try to take that away and to take away maybe the tush push, which is, like I said earlier, something that's going to be very hard for this defense to stop just because it's so difficult for any defense to stop right now. So there's a lot of things that we could be looking at and different things that they could be doing this season. I'm really curious to see what they do that's a little bit different. And I guarantee you Spags has got something up his sleeve specifically for this Eagles team with 2 weeks to prepare for it. So that's going to be something. What extra thing is he going to throw at an offense now that he wouldn't have thrown a couple weeks ago because he didn't know what he had? I think he was still trying to find what was working before they played the Dolphins. Now I think he has a pretty good idea of what they're doing because he's finally settled in. And it looks like he maybe knew that a little bit earlier on than normal this year. But I still think that he was still playing with things, and especially with Minhue coming back late, I do think that that's probably playing into it as well. So what is Kansas City going to do on the defensive side to slow this Eagles offense down? How are they going to play against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith? The nice thing for some of these corners, though, is that they've just seen these guys just a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. It's not like they haven't played them before. So you're going to know some of the things that they're going to be doing.
And I think Brown in particular, as good as he isn't the most dangerous prototype wide receiver to this Chiefs secondary. He doesn't have that elite speed that can run away from them. So if it's physicality on physicality, I can live with taking my chances with Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson and certainly with L'Jarius Sneed. It's going to be about who gets that slight edge. But I think it's also about protecting the middle because when you look at your leading tackler on this roster this year, it is Drew Tranquill. We have, I think, gotten shifted out of the fact because it's been Nick Bolton that's been hurt. It is Drew Tranquill, Trent McDuffie that are leading this team in tackles right now. How do you protect that from being an onslaught and just being directed straight down 23's throat?
Yeah, that's going to be a big question. And really quick on A.J. Brown, he's also not 6'5". I do think that if he was taller, that would be a bigger issue for Kansas City because that's something that they've always struggled with is that elite height type receiver. And he's not that. He is a very good wide receiver. I think he's one of the top 5 in the NFL, but he is not a 6'5" guy like a Mike Williams would be. So lots to talk about when we get into this Eagles matchup. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about going through this week.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have it all for you. Matt Derrick, insider with the Chiefs on the facility and everything else. We'll have him for Wednesday. Make sure you join us then. We're going to go behind enemy lines on Thursday, and we will have you prepped and ready for that game come the Friday show. We appreciate your time. Tomorrow, we're going to dig into the specifics. Who are the areas to put some pressure on, literally and figuratively? And then we'll start taking a look at the deep dive at the Philadelphia Eagles. Thank you for being with us today. Make sure you like and sub and hit the bell. Join us on Twitter, if you like, at Chris Clark NFL and Ryan Tracy NFL. You can find us over there always. And I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be the kickoff to the second half of the Chiefs run. Let's see what they bring. We appreciate you spending your time with us today. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.